Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I live more on the Madison side at the edge of Huntsville. It's surrounded by a lot of residential areas, but I've seen some spooky stuff at the Walls of Jericho and Rainbow Mountain. Walking with a friend, super lost, exploring random cave pockets. We found a cave with some half-eaten animals inside. Neat. Hardly anyone really goes down the Jamaica Trail since it winds around the back property of these large land plots. Also means that the trail is barely visible and not a damn signpost. Dusk is rapidly fading into twilight. Talking and laughing, don't really care until my friend Chris stops walking right in front of me. WTF, man, keep walking.
You didn't hear that. When we start walking again, listen, it sounds like someone is matching our footsteps.
This was during the fall, so each footstep made a ton of noise that would echo around the tree. Sure enough, as we start walking again, I can hear someone else walking in sync with our steps. Not just an echo, we can tell that the noise is off to our left, but can't see anything due to rock formation. As we come round the rocks, the steps sound like they're coming closer and closer, as if whoever was walking would run right into us around the corner. Instead, the footsteps stop suddenly when we get a view of the back lands of a private lot. There appears to be a shirt floating in midair up the hill roughly 50 yards from our position.
You see that dude up there?
You mean the shirt stuck on the branches? We just stood there, eyes adjusting, trying to decide whether to go forward or just turn around. We turned to face each other and something made a noise that sounded like rushing water. You know that noise a ton of leaves make when a gust of wind comes through. It was like that, except there was no wind. We turn back and the figure is just gone. No shirt, nothing. Walk back straight, too spooky for me. It's mundane, but it's at least true. The Walls of Jericho was way creepier, but still best camping trip ever. Well, I guess I'll tell the Walls of Jericho story. Walls of Jericho is a canyon in northern Alabama, located right on the state line between Alabama and Tennessee, and is formed from a river that turns into a waterfall at the top of the canyon. It's a beautiful place, but you have to hike down into the canyon to then hike up to the waterfall. It's honestly a mild hike. Going down isn't too hard, but with a lot of gear. It's pretty tiring. Before we hiked down, we decided to sleep near the cliff edge that drops off onto another cliff face, etc. We found a great spot that already had a fire pit dug out and a lot of good wood still in the pit, like someone had collected way more firewood than they needed and just left it there. This spot is barely off the road, and it took probably 10 minutes walking there, so we assumed they just packed up and left. It's not super pertinent, but there was also a whole change of clothes that we found in the fire pit. Anyway, it starts to get spooky at night. We're sitting around the fire, drinking, smoking, talking, when we hear a scuffle in the little valley below us. Girls get scared when Josh starts talking about the wild animals and how this and that totally lives in these woods. Whatever, man, we're people with weapons and tents. Nothing will mess with us, and that night it was like everything was just screwing with us. Sleeping arrangements leave Chris sleeping in my tent, and we're just talking about what we would do if X showed up or we got attacked by Y. Then we'd do this when this weird-as howl goes off in the valley below. It was like a mix between a person angrily crying out of frustration and a straight-up wolf howl. That was spooky, but the quiet afterwards was deafening. No more little yips from foxes, no more bugs chirping, no hoots, just dead silence. We're waiting when it howls again, as an onomatopoeia it sounds like. Chris just says,
Man, that coyote sounds weird.
But I've heard plenty of coyotes in my time, and that did not sound like a simple coyote. When I tell him this, he just says screw it, grabs the flashlight, and goes out into the darkness, leaving me to fumble around for my knife when that same howl goes off again and I hear Chris yell.
What the hell is that?
I rolled out the tent to see Chris standing at the edge of the cliff looking down into the valley with the light. As I'm walking up to him, he turns off the light and says,
Look down into the canyon and keep looking until I turn on the light.
I did as he said, and when he turned on the light, all you could see were dozens upon dozens sets of reflective eyes looking back at us. Now I know animals will watch you in the dark, and it's not uncommon to see this with spiders and tall grass, but this was a cliff face with a clearing beneath it. And dear God, it got quiet. I'm saying so quietly we could hear one of the couples trying to bang at the other end of camp. So quiet that when the next howl went off, we almost fell backwards off the cliff. See, before the howl was down in the canyon, but each one was getting progressively louder until the last one sounded like it was at the edge of camp. It was so loud that the rest of the group woke up and started to pour out, asking who was yelling at that time of night. I remember that question echoing in my head. Who's yelling? Not, what the hell is that? Everyone's gathered around the smoldering fire, asking WTF is going on. Josh's dumbass says,
It's probably a coyote.
Like, sure Josh. It's a coyote that sounds like a married man of 10 years found out his wife had been cheating on him for 11 years. GTFO here with that. Tell them about the progression, how the last sounded right behind our camp inside a field of chest-high grass. Everyone starts getting freaked out when Chris swings the flashlight over towards the grass, just like before. The edge of the darkness is full of reflective eyes much larger than down the cliff, except these are moving in and out of the light as if they were fading back to pop out at another spot. Everyone collectively WTF is that when Josh gets the fantastic idea to throw a rock into the brush. All the eyes go back and the howl returns, this time right on top of us, all around us, and we all instinctively got back to back brandishing our variety of weapons, mainly machetes, but everything just stops and the normal sounds of nature return. We immediately rearranged our camp so all tents were next to each other and as close as they could possibly be, but it didn't seem like anyone wanted to sleep. Everyone was sorta wired from the noise, but we all went back to our tents and tried to sleep. It wasn't until later that it got weird again. I had fallen asleep and had a dream about this creature attacking our camp, trashing everything, but I never saw the creature in my dream since it was always just barely out of sight. I was shaken awake by Chris, whose face was inches away from mine, but before I could say anything he put his hand over my mouth and pointed to the outside of the tent and cupped his ears. I really wish he hadn't woken me up. Outside it sounded like something with heavy feet was dragging something else, all around the perimeter of our tents, sighing and wheezing. It would stop at each tent and make a light scratching noise on each one. For those who don't know, light scratching on a tent door is directly the same as knocking on someone's door. It's a sign that says, hey, someone's out here. Open up. And whatever was out there was doing it on each tent, circling around and around, still making those wheezing noises and knocking on everyone's tent. Chris motions towards me, pantomiming a slash across the back part of my tent, and I knew what he was trying to do, cut through the tent instead of fumbling with the zipper to surprise whatever was out there. Being in a situation like that really makes you feel like drastic action is your best bet. I don't know why, but we tore through the back of my tent like it was butter. This time, instead of a howl, there was a lot of wheezing like someone constantly out of breath. We both hit the two exits to camp, down the cliff and in towards the brush, and to this day I still don't believe what I saw, and I only saw the back half. It was like a hunched-over old lady, covered with tattered black cloth. One arm was out and looked like bone wrapped in paper skin. Behind it appeared to be either really dirty trash bags or some kind of tail it just dragged along behind it. We both started screaming as loud as we could, and something seemed to match our voices as the howling started up again, this time in the direction of the brush, right where the hag had been. It was piercing and long this time, extend the human part more, and that's pretty on point, forcing us to cover our ears. And then it was over. Everyone woke up again, scared again, and the decision to go home at dawn was quickly reached. We left that morning but returned the next day with more, stronger weapons and no women. Man, we thought the night had been scary, and they say hindsight is 20/20, but when we returned to the same campsite we found the whole place destroyed. The fire pit had been dug out and thrown over the cliff. Solid slab of concrete, all the firewood was splintered, and the burnt change of clothes was gone. The weirdest part was you could see where our tents had been, you could see all our footprints, but there was a long-ass groove in the dirt that went around the tent clearing and led directly into the brush. Yeah, the computer died, so I had to switch to the phone. There's not much left, but there was one last thing that felt very scary movie tier and legit creepy, so I'll share that. When we were talking to other campers, there was one couple who was in the same horse pasture as us. They had been down in the valley when we were camping at the cliff's edge, and they had heard the same things we did, but the super creepy thing was what they said about the one night in between when we left and came back. That night they said they heard an animal limping around the edge of their camp, and while they said they didn't think much of it, there was one huge detail that stood out. They said it must have been really windy because branches kept bumping into the tent and scratching it.
This was all in my head, so not as scary as some of the stories here, but the scariest experience I had was caused by sleep deprivation. For 2 nights I couldn't fall asleep, and on the third still found myself struggling to sleep. Trying to relax myself, I put on this TV show, but stupidly chose to put on a horror TV show, which only added to a growing sense of unease. The show was about this woman whose sister went missing when she was a kid, and as an adult decides to investigate. She learns her sister, who is also herself was sacrificed by this pagan cult. Yet it gets confusing and the time sequence starts to blur. And her mother is actually like a witch that is continuously in a never-ending cycle sacrificing her child to bring on springtime. Real disturbing stuff. Anyways, I drift into this strange paranoid half-sleep where the sense of paranoia and elements from the movie seem to drift into my half-asleep awareness. I'm upstairs in my bed, but then suddenly a second passes. I open my eyes and I'm back down on my basement couch. How did I get down here, or did I dream of going upstairs and it never really happened? Or am I dreaming now? This seems to repeat several times, as though I were trapped in a loop like in the TV show. Start questioning my perception. Is anything real? How can I tell? Get back into bed for what feels like the 1000th time. But I'm struck by this crippling fear. I need to go to sleep, I know, but somehow feel that it won't be safe. I sit up hyper-aware, listening, that uncanny sensation that if I listen hard enough I'll hear something listening back. Watching as the hours creep by and I see the light of morning flicker through my window blinds and birds chirping. Other minor scary incidents. I suddenly woke up early in the morning. Feel an overwhelming sense of dread. Look to my right. In Kai black writing on the wall. The words wash away into the air.
First thing I remember is actually an early memory of when I was a baby. All I remember is it's dark and I see my Elmo blanket at the top of my crib, and next to it is a dark figure with 2 white eyes staring at me. I was in pre to kindergarten, I think. My parents said that I would always talk about El Payaso and someone called El Payaso that would visit with me when I would go to sleep. Payaso means clown in English. The thing is, I didn't know what a clown was or what the word payaso meant, but I would always talk to them about it, not letting me sleep and always running out of my room late at night to sleep with them. I was 10 or 11 and I was sleeping in my parents' room. I woke up on my side and saw these spiders crawling up my wall. Some were huge and some were tiny. I said one thing, Mo, and before I could finish I remember I couldn't move from fear, and I felt my mom put her hand on my mouth and then heard her shush me. I turned around and she and my dad were dead asleep. I looked back and the spiders were gone. I was having a sleepover with one of my friends. I had a dream where I was running in my house, but on the walls and the furniture was moving on its own, and I heard lots of banging. I woke up in a state of sleep paralysis and heard a woman singing one of those Latin Catholic songs in my ear. When I was free I got up scared, looked around and saw my brother and my friend were both up looking around in the darkness. They said they'd heard a pound bang from my side of the room.
Lived alone in my parents' house while they moved and were looking to sell. Was in a rural area. Greentext from here. 3 a.m. Just me and my dog. Playing video games and smoking. All of a sudden hear one of my 2 cats starts to screech and freak out. The dog and I went to investigate. See my 2 cats walk out of my sister's now empty room toward my room. I turn around to walk back to my room and I notice my dog is locked into a stare at my sister's bedroom's door. All of a sudden I hear the highest, most horrifying scream you could imagine. I froze. My dog's hair is standing up but he hasn't moved an inch or made a sound. I slowly walk backwards toward my room followed by a dog and close the door. Stayed up until dawn. Never been more frightened. I know it wasn't my cats for I had watched them leave. Can still hear the scream in my head to this day. To finish the story. 3 months later. My parents finally sold the house. I'm up grabbing a few things from the attic that were left. Find a random picture of a woman with a 70s haircut right near the entrance to the attic. Nobody in my family has a clue who this person in the photograph is. The attic door did not close right when we closed it for the final time. Definitely a strange occurrence, and that night was frightening.
Firstly, this was in the US, Oregon, and these are as true as I can remember them, but I concede that I probably filled parts in over the years. Be me. 9. The bedroom is on the 2nd floor. Looking out the window. Purple-colored monkey hand scratches live in the window. It's incredibly loud, but no one can hear it apparently. Too scared to scream. Pass out because I'm a damn child. Wake up, nothing there. Tell parents, who are into a cult because they went to an art school in the 90s. Dad thinks it's a negative thought form that he and my mom made because their marriage is falling apart. It did fall apart. Dad thinks it will go away on its own. Tell brother about hand and he has night terrors. Night 2, same, dream, this time confident because it's a dream. Look out the window while the hand is at work. The purple ape is sitting in a fetal position, its left arm is very long. My eyes trail from the ape all the way up to his hand. That is halfway through spelling live again. Fear overwhelms me. Look down. It's looking straight at me. Its eyes are glassy and black and its fur is dark purple but otherwise just looks like a gorilla with a long left arm. It looks dead at me until it's done scratching my window. I'm silently crying as its arm retracts slowly and the creature runs around the side of my house. Presumably to jump my fence because it was in my backyard. Go to sleep in fear. Wake up obsessed with it. Just want the dreams to stop. Called it the Furry. The Furry was supposed to be condescending. It wasn't. My heartbeat is getting faster just thinking of its name. It's not a scary name and it's not supposed to scare you, but I was 9, I was scared and my fear was called the Furry. Fear gets worse. My brother is having trouble sleeping now too. He has different nightmares though. Aliens abducting him. Dad sits me down with one of his magic books. Starts pointing out paintings of thought forms. None of them look like the Furry. He is still convinced this is his fault. Okay, just for context here, my dad is the oldest weeb I know. I'm pretty sure he was the first, but I don't know. The point is he has a really nice katana with a polished folded steel blade. He knows I love his sword. He lets me sleep with his sword. Says he put a protective spell on it and that I can use it to kill the thought form. Night 3, I've been waiting for hours. I don't think the Furry is inherently evil, it just knows if you're going to die tonight, statistically it's gonna write live most of the time. Fall asleep. Wake up because of the scratching sound. I lean out the window. No screen because I pushed it out a long time ago. Without looking I try to cut it. I hear screaming like something is dying. Look down. It's gone. My face when D is carved into my window. My face when it's still there in the morning. My face when I might have carved it myself. I'm 20 now and I'm not sure how much of this is real, but it's in my memory, so it's real to me.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.